What if the story of civilization does not begin where our history books insist it does? What if everything we call the dawn of humanity is only the most recent sunrise after countless forgotten nights? Long before recorded time, before pharaohs, prophets, and empires, there may have been eras so vast that even myth can barely remember them. Traces of those impossible ages remain, not in folklore, not in ruins, but pressed into clay tablets left by a people who appeared with sudden brilliance in ancient Mesopotamia. They called themselves the Sumerians, and somewhere among their tablets is a document unlike anything in human archives, a quiet artifact that dares to measure time in units we cannot comprehend. It lists rulers who reigned not for decades, not for centuries, but for tens of thousands of years. This artifact is known as the Sumerian King List, and it whispers of a world that ended long before ours began. Before we continue, take a moment to breathe, to settle into the quiet, and if you enjoy these deep dives into ancient mystery, consider subscribing to Cosmic Enigma. Let me also know where you're watching from, beneath which sky this ancient story is finding you tonight. The tale begins in the shifting sands of what is today southern Iraq, a region once fed by rivers in a world lush and young. Archaeologists digging through layers of ruined cities discovered small tablets filled with wedge-shaped writing, cuneiform, humanity's oldest known script. Among thousands of records about harvests, taxes, hymns, and laws, one tablet did not behave like history. It read more like a fracture in time. The list recorded a sequence of rulers who governed long before the known dynasties, names like Alulim, Algar, Enmanluana, and Dumuzid the Shepherd. Each ruler was associated with a single ancient city, and beside each name stood a reign so enormous it mocked reason. 28,800 years, 36,000 years, 43,200 years. Combined, these kings ruled for over 241,000 years. Then, abruptly, the list says, the flood swept over. After that line, the reigns shrink to human proportions, decades, not ages, and the kings become figures we can verify archaeologically. That seamless transition from mythic to historical poses a question modern scholars struggle to answer. How could a civilization both invent fantasy and record history in the same breath? Why begin a royal chronicle with impossibilities, then continue with events we know to be real? Were those enormous numbers symbolic? Were the early rulers gods? Were these spans astronomical cycles disguised as lifetimes? Or did the Sumerians genuinely believe they were recording a lost epic erased by a global catastrophe? To understand why this tablet matters, we must understand who the Sumerians were. They emerged suddenly around 4000 BCE, with no known cultural ancestors and no linguistic relatives. Their language did not evolve from anything nearby. It appeared fully formed and then vanished. The first time they wrote, their writing system was already complex. Their cities were planned with irrigation, drainage, religious districts, and administrative centers. They mapped the heavens with precision, tracking lunar nodes, eclipse cycles, and planetary movements with mathematical accuracy, rivaling later civilizations. Their sexagesimal system, based on 60, still shapes the way we count time. To us, they appear like a civilization remembering rather than inventing knowledge. If their records say kingship descended from the heavens, perhaps that phrase was not spiritual but metaphorical, knowledge descending into human hands after a long silence. Archaeology supports at least part of their tale. In the Sumerian city of Shuruppak, associated in legend with the flood hero Ziusudra, excavators found a thick layer of river sediment separating two distinct phases of settlement. Beneath the mud lay remains of an older culture. Above it, the Sumerian world began anew. This flood layer dates to around 2900 BCE, matching the transition point in the King List. Similar flood deposits appear across the Mesopotamian plain. Whether the deluge was global or regional, something marked the end of one world and the beginning of another. But the more unsettling question is what came before that buried horizon. The people beneath the flood layer left pottery, buildings, and artifacts unlike later Sumerian culture, more primitive in some ways, more enigmatic in others. Their designs follow mathematical ratios that reappear in later temples. Their settlements had irrigation long before Sumer's own canals. Toward the Persian Gulf, now submerged, sonar scans reveal the traces of ancient riverbeds and possible settlement patterns from a time before rising waters drowned the land. Could this lost coastal region have been the true cradle of the civilization Sumer later rebuilt? If so, the king list might not describe gods or metaphors, but memories, distorted by time, told through ritual, and eventually pressed into clay. The numbers themselves may contain clues. Sumerian mathematics was deeply symbolic. They measured cosmic time in units called shar, cycles of 3,600 years. Many reign lengths on the king list are multiples of that sacred cycle. The total 241-200-year span divides almost perfectly into 67 such cycles. Too neat to be random. Perhaps these were not lifespans, but entire ages of knowledge passed down through priesthoods or lineages, so ancient they no longer had individual names. The idea of civilization rising and falling in cycles appears across world myths. In India, ages called yugas span vast cosmic periods. In Egypt, divine rulers precede human pharaohs by millennia. In Greece, Hesiod writes of golden, silver, bronze, and iron ages. In Mesoamerica, worlds rise and are destroyed again and again. Everywhere the story is the same. Something greater existed before, and we are living in the aftermath of loss. Sumer did not claim to invent civilization, they claimed to inherit it. Their myths describe knowledge as something stored and restored after catastrophe. Enki, god of wisdom, preserves the sacred laws of civilization in the deep waters during the flood, so they can be recovered afterward. Their priests built temples not as expressions of power, but as attempts to realign the world with the stars, as if they were rebuilding a blueprint whose original design existed elsewhere. Even their architecture suggests continuity. The oldest temple at Eridu was rebuilt more than 20 times over thousands of years, each new structure mirroring the original layout even when styles changed. It is as if they remembered a sacred pattern they could not fully explain. Yet history itself did not treat these memories gently. Later, civilizations copied the king list and altered it. Babylonian scribes rewrote names to justify new dynasties. Assyrian kings edited chronology to legitimize their rule. Over centuries, myth and politics blended until the document became a political tool, rather than a record of distant ages. But even after alteration, the massive reigns before the flood survived, stubborn and unexplained, as if protected by the weight of tradition. Modern scholars dismiss them, not because they have been disproven, but because they do not fit the accepted narrative of linear progress. Our culture believes civilization began recently, advanced slowly, and reached its peak with us. Anything older must be myth. We assume knowledge accumulates, not resurfaces. But what if humanity has risen and fallen many times? What if writing did not begin in Sumer? Only memory did? The flood becomes not just water, but a metaphor for amnesia. After each collapse, survivors rebuild, remembering pieces, forgetting others. The king list might represent the last flicker of recollection before the ancient world faded completely. And today, we may be living in one of those transitional intervals again. An age of immense knowledge, yet fragile memory. Our records are digital, ephemeral, and easily erased. If catastrophe struck tomorrow, how much would remain? Which fragments would future archaeologists misinterpret? Would they look at our records and call them myth? Perhaps that is why the Sumerians carved into clay. Clay survives fire, water, and time. Clay refuses to forget. To hold one of their tablets is to hold the thoughts of a human being who lived thousands of years ago, someone who pressed symbols into wet earth and trusted that someday someone far away would understand. You can feel the ridges of their hand, the pressure of their stylus, the heat of the kiln that transformed mud into memory. They recorded not to glorify themselves, but to anchor reality against erosion. Now imagine standing at the ruins of Eridu as night falls. The wind moves across the cracked earth like a tide returning to shore. Stars rise where ancient priests once watched them. The ground beneath you holds not one city, but many, layered like sedimentary dreams. Somewhere below lies the world before the flood. silent, sealed, waiting. Perhaps the king list is not a chronicle of rulers at all, but a message. We have lived many times and we will live again. History is not a straight line, but a cycle. Civilizations bloom like constellations, appearing, disappearing, returning under new skies. And if the past is truly as deep as the Sumerians remembered, then our own era is not the beginning, but merely the latest ripple in a much older ocean. The clay whispers still. All we have to do is listen.